Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. My apologies for missing recording this on Monday evening. So I missed the share on Thursday. I missed the share on Sunday as well. My apologies. It was due to matters beyond my control, but it's good to be back. Before we begin, I just want to mention that our learning should be a schus, of course, for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasunim Batzara Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam, Bein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Aleim Vayitziam Yitzar L'Revacha Me'afela L'Oiro Mishibud L'Geula. Also, the learning today should be a schus for Refuah Shalema for Ariel Yosef ben Miriam Razel, who is in need of Rachim Shemayim. Also, Meir ben Chayesara. They should have a Refuah Shalema B'Sach Shar Chayei Yisrael. I would also mention that I personally got a mazel tov. I had an anicle today. My daughter had a son. Mir Hashem, we should share simchas with Gans Klal Yisrael. So, we're holding in the second volume of Mishnah Berurah, and we pick up today on Samach Hey Amud Aleph. I hope to complete Samach Hey Amud Aleph, and let's see how far we can get on Samach Hey Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchas B'tzias HaPas, the halachas that govern after we've washed Netilas Yadayim and we have begun the Suda. So we're discussing the halachas of making the hamoitzi on the lechem, on the bread, exactly how we go about making the berachah, cutting the lechem, distributing the lechem, etc., etc. And we're going to discuss some fascinating, we're going to touch upon some fascinating sugyas that are very, very complex. A lot of it is really beyond the scope of what we do here, but we'll try to explain it as best as possible and kind of keep it as simple as we can. So we pick up on Samach Hey Amud Aleph, Siman Kuf Samach Zayin, Sif Tes Vav in the Mechaber, 4 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch on Samach Hey Amud Aleph. Says the Mechaber a very interesting halacha. Ein hamesubin rashoim litoim, those who are sitting around the table by the Suda are not allowed to literally taste, they're not allowed to eat from the lechem, ad sheyitoim haboitzeya, until the boitzeya, until the one who is making the bracha and cutting the challah, until the boitzeya eats, the rest of the mesubin are not allowed to eat. Now, that's what the words mean. But of course, we have to see exactly what is the case. So let's take a look here at Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Ayin Vav. Mishnah Berurah opens up with a very interesting statement, and he doesn't explain why he says it the way he does. We'll get into it a little bit. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ein HaMesubin. What's the case over here? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Kisheyotzu beberachas haboitzeya. We're discussing a case where the boitzeya is being moitzi the rest of the people around the table with his berachas hamoitzi. Okay, let's pause over there for a second, and let's accept what the Mishnah Berurah just said. Let's digest it, and let's understand, according to this Chavetz Chaim, precisely what the case is. So, the case would seem to be a traditional Shabbos table. You have, let's say, Mommy and Tati and 6 children, Kenai Nahara, sitting around the table. Or not children, let's make them older children so that everybody's adults and everybody needs brachas, etc., etc. So everybody goes and washes, everybody sits down around the table, and now the Tati is going to go ahead and he's going to be moitzi, all of the mesubin, he's going to be the boitzeya, he's going to make the berachas hamoitzi, he's going to cut the challah, and he's going to be moitzi everybody in his berachas hamoitzi. In that scenario, says the Chavetz Chaim, that's when the Mechaber is saying over here, Ein hamesubin rashoim litoim, the mesubin, the people sitting around the table, they are not allowed to eat ad sheyitoim haboitzeya. So nobody eats before Tati. So that means if Tati goes ahead and cuts pieces of challah, and he gives out challah to everybody, but he has not yet eaten, nobody's allowed to eat. You can't eat until he eats. That's the opening salvo, so to speak here, of the Chavetz Chaim. But then the Chavetz Chaim continues, and he says, V'ayin b'prima gadim, however, Take a look at the Pri Megadim in the Eshel Avram Sivkat Lamed Hey Shemet Tzaded, who takes the position that afilu im loy niskaven lotzeis berachah, even in a case where the mesubim are not being yotze with the bracha of the beitzeh. V'chol echad mevarach la'atzmai, and everybody is going to make their own hamoitzi. Kevan shekulam zekukim l'kikara yishala beitzeh, since everybody is waiting to get a piece of challah from the beitzeh, ein midarach hakavod litoim, it wouldn't be bakavadik for the mesubin to eat kaidim sheyitam hu, before the beitzeh himself gets to eat. So, now that we've seen the rest of the Mishnah Berurah here in Eiskat 9 Vav, we have two different scenarios. We have the opening scenario of the Chavetz Chaim, which is, like I said, the traditional Shabbos Suda, where the beitzeh, the father, the balabas, he is the one that's being mitzi everybody else in the bracha. If we look at it in the context of that scenario, so the halacha that we have over here is the tati, the balabayas, is being mitzi everybody else around the table in the bracha of hamitzi. They cannot eat before he eats. Even if he gives them each a piece of challah, they can't eat before he eats. Chavetz Chaim brings down from the Pri Megadim a second scenario, and that is, let's say the beitzeh, the father, is not being mitzi everybody in the hamitzi. Everybody is making their own hamitzi, but they don't have challah. They're still all getting challah from the balabayas. So they don't need his bracha, but they do need his challah. Pri Megadim says that the Mechaber is talking even in that case. So again, two cases. Case number one, where the father is being mitzi everybody around the table. Case number two, the father is not being mitzi everybody around the table, but everybody around the table needs to get challah from the beitzeh because they don't have their own challah. In both of these cases, it comes out that the mesubin cannot eat before the beitzeh. Now, before we dig a little deeper into this, let's go a little bit further. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut 9 Zayin, Rashoim litoim. The Mechaber said that the mesubin are not permitted to eat, to taste, before the beitzeh does. The Chavetz Chaim explains what that means. In both scenarios that we just discussed, the challah is by the beitzeh, right? We have one case where the beitzeh is being mitzi everybody in the bracha, and he has to give everybody a piece. The Pri Megadim's case is the beitzeh is not being mitzi everybody in the bracha. They're making their own brachas, but still they don't have challah. So in both cases, the beitzeh has all the challah. The Mechaber says in either, according to this Mishnah Berurah and according to the Pri Megadim, in both of these cases, nobody's allowed to eat before the beitzeh. Now, how are they going to eat before the beitzeh? Did the beitzeh give them a challah or not? Says the Mishnah Berurah 9 Zayin, they're not rasham litoim. Tahainu sheyirtza lachtoich min hakikar shel beitzeh. What they want to do is they want to reach over to the challah of the beitzeh, and they want to break off a piece of challah, or they want to cut a piece of challah, and they want to eat it. V'litoim kaidem loy, and to eat before him. The herst. What's happening over here is the tati went ahead. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamaitzi lechem min haaretz. And now somebody wants to go reach out his hand, break off a piece of challah, and eat it. He's very hungry. Or take a knife and cut off a piece of challah and eat it. Before the tati, before the balabayas eats a piece of challah, says the Mechaber, you're not allowed to do that. Now, what's the reason for this halacha? So the truth is, this is all based on a Gemara in Brachas. This is a Gemara in Brachas on Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, where we have a member in the Gemara that says exactly this, that the mesubin are not allowed to eat before the beitzeh. But the Gemara doesn't say why. The Gemara doesn't give a tam. It turns out that this is a rather complex sugya. In the first scenario of the Mishnah Berurah, where the beitzeh is being mitzi the mesubin in the bracha of hamitzi, there are two possible reasons why the people sitting around the table are not allowed to eat before the beitzeh. One is a halacha in berachas hanenin. berachas hanenin, a bracha rishona that you make on food, like a shahakal on a drink of water, a bay priya eitz on an apple, a hamaitzi lechem in an aretz on challah, these are all berachas hanenin. There's a halacha in berachas hanenin that is different than other brachas, let's say berachas hamitzvahs. Let's take berachas hamitzvahs for a moment. Let's say Reuven and Shimon are standing together, and Shimon wants to take the dalud minim on Sukkos. He wants to make a bracha sheket ishadim b'mitzvahs of tzivanu on letilas lulav. He wants to be yotze the bracha of dalud minim. But maybe Shimon is a recent Baal Tshuva, and he doesn't know how to make a bracha. He's not capable of making a bracha. The halacha is, Reuven, even if he was already yotze the mitzvah of dalud minim, and even if he's not going to take the dalud minim now, Reuven is allowed to make a bracha of asher kedishanu b'mitzvahs of tzivanu al netilas lulav, and he could be moitzi Shimon in the bracha. It's a berachas hamitzvahs. Reuven could be moitzi Shimon in the bracha on the mitzvah of dalud minim, even though Reuven personally doesn't need to be yotze the mitzvah now, because he already was yotze the mitzvah today, and he has no intent on being yotze the mitzvah now. He's not even going to pick up the lulav and the esrog. He's just making the bracha to be moitzi Shimon. He's allowed to do that. And it works. Shimon is yotze. Why does it work? Because of a combination of two halachas. Halacha number one is shemeya ka'oina. When Shimon listens to the bracha, the halacha is shemeya ka'oina. Somebody who listens with kavana is as if he himself is saying it. So when Shimon listens to Reuven, it's as if Shimon himself made the bracha. But there's another halacha that also makes this work. And that is the halacha of arevos. Kol Yisrael arevim zelozeh. Literally, every Yid is a guarantor for his fellow Yid. We're familiar with the term arev, when somebody takes a loan and you sign on to his loan for him as a guarantor, you're called an arev. Kol Yisrael arevim zelozeh. We are all guarantors for each other. We all have a responsibility for each other. I, as a Yid, have a responsibility to help another Yid be Mekayim a mitzvah. If Reuven is standing by Shimon, and Shimon wants to be yotze the mitzvah of dalud minim, so he needs to make a bracha of al netilas lulav, and he's not able to make the bracha of al netilas lulav himself, I, as a fellow Yid, even though I already was yotze the mitzvah of dalud minim today, and I'm not going to take the lulav and esrog now, I could make a bracha for him, because to a certain extent, I have a chiyuv to make that bracha. Like this, you would say, how can I make the bracha? I have no chiyuv to make the bracha. I was already yotze dalud minim, and I'm not being yotze dalud minim now. Isn't that a bracha of HaTorah? How could you make a bracha? Sheket yishadim b'sayis v'tzivan al netilas lulav. If you're not going to be yotze the mitzvah al netilas lulav, isn't that a bracha? Isn't that a bracha of HaTorah? No, it's not. You know why? Because Reuven carries an obligation. Reuven has a chiyuv to help Shimon be Mekayim the mitzvah. Therefore, Reuven could make the bracha for Shimon, and it's not a bracha of HaTorah. And Shimon could be yotze with the bracha of Reuven because of shemeya ka'oina. So those two halachas combined allow Reuven to make a berachas hamitzvahs for Shimon. And that carries over to all sorts of other mitzvahs. Let's say it's Purim and I already heard Megillah. I was already yotze Megillah. I could go ahead and make a bracha on Mikra Megillah and be moitzi somebody else who still needs to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. Because it's arevus. I'm an arev for him. I carry his responsibility. And he could listen to me say Amen and be yotze the bracha with Shemaya Koina. Now that's by berachas hamitzvahs. But that doesn't apply to berachas hanenin. That doesn't apply to a shahakal on a cup of water. Why? Because let's take the same scenario. Reuven and Shimon are standing together, and Shimon is thirsty. Shimon wants to have a glass of water. Shimon needs to make a bracha on a glass of water in order to be able to have a drink of water. Now, Shemei Ka'ina works. Shimon could listen to Reuven shahakal and he could be Yaitse with Shimei Kaina. But Reuven cannot make the shahakal. You know why? Because if Reuven makes a shahakal without drinking, if he wants to drink water, he can. Even if he's only going to drink water in order to allow himself to make the bracha, he can do that. But if Reuven is not going to drink any water, Reuven is not allowed to make a shahakal because it would be a bracha of HaTorah. What happened to Arevus? It's very simple. Arevus is by a mitzvah. If another Yid needs to be Mekayim a mitzvah, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelozeh, I have an obligation to help him be Mekayim the mitzvah. But there's no mitzvah to take a drink of water. So Shimon has no obligation to drink a cup of water. There's no halacha driving him to drink a cup of water. And therefore, even though I'm an Arev, I have no obligation to help him drink the cup of water. So therefore, I'm not allowed to say the berachah shahakal for him, unless I'm also drinking water. If I'm drinking water, then fine. Then I have a right to make the bracha because I'm drinking water, and I can be mitzi you, and you'll be yaitze with Shemei Kaina. But if I'm not being nene, I cannot be mitzi you in a berachas hanenin if I'm not being yaitze, if I'm not being nene. Now, what does that have to do with the halacha we just learned? Well, there's a machlokes rishonim. That has to do with this halacha of ein hamasubin rasham litaim achiyitam habeitzeya. The Rosh in one teretz and the Rabbeinu Yoina want to posit, they want to opine, if you will, that if the beitzeya is being moitzi the mesubin in the berachas hamoitzi, then the mesubin cannot eat before the beitzeya. You know why? Because of the halacha that we just mentioned. Over here, we're dealing with berachas hanenin. The beitzeya is trying to be moitzi the mesubin in the bracha of hamoitzi. Hamoitzi is a berachas hanenin. Now, if the beitzeya was not yet nene, then in a sense, he can't be moitzi the mesubin yet, because he had no right to make the bracha for the mesubin. He wasn't nene yet. So again, let's imagine the balabayas is sitting at the head of the dining room table. He's being moitzi 10 people that are sitting around the dining room table. Why does this work? It works because the balabayas is making a hamoitzi and he's eating challah. So he's making a berachas hanenin and he's being nene. So now he could be moitzi the other people. They're being yaitze with Shemei Kaina, and he was allowed to say the bracha because he's being nene. But if the mesubin eat before he does, then they ate before he ate. And before he eats, he can't be moitzi them, because he wasn't allowed to make the bracha just for them. He's only allowed to make the bracha because he's going to eat. So according to the Rosh in one teretz, and according to the Rabbeinu Yoina, when we have a Gemara that says, Ein hamasubin rasham litaim ad sheyitam habeitzeya, it's a din in the bracha. The reason why the mesubin aren't allowed to eat before the beitzeya eats is because until the point at which the beitzeya himself eats, he really can't be moitzi the mesubin. And perhaps that's why the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, in his tremendous wisdom, he's walking a tightrope in the Rishonim over here. First, he says, you should know, this is kishayatzu beberachas habeitzeya. If the beitzeya is being moitzi the other people with the berachas hamoitzi, then there's a din in the bracha that says that ein hamasubin rasham litaim ad sheyitam habeitzeya. Then the Chavetz Chaim brings down the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim says that we don't go like the Rosh in his first teretz and like the Rabbeinu Yoina. According to the other Rishonim, the reason why Ein hamasubin rasham litam ad sheyitam habeitzeya is not a din in the bracha. Yes, it's true. One Yid can't be moitzi another Yid in berachas hanenin unless he himself is going to be nene. But in this case, the beitzeya is going to be nene. So it's true, he wasn't nene yet. So what, he wasn't nene yet? But when he made the bracha al das to be nene. So there was no reason he wasn't allowed to make the bracha. There's no bracha of HaTorah here. And the Shaimim, the Mesubin, are being yoitza with Shemei Koine. So the other Rishonim look at the Rosh in his first teretz and the Rabbeinu Yoina, and they say, no, they don't like that. So the other Rishonim learn, what's the time of the halacha, Eina Mesubin Rasham Litam Achita Mabitzeya? It's a din derech eretz. It's a din in covered. We're going to see later on in this Siman, maybe even today, even though this is taking so much time that I doubt it. By the way, a lot of what I'm saying today is some of it is in the Mishnah Berurah on Amid Beis. We'll see if we get there. But we'll be able to do that faster because I spoke all this out already and explained it already. But the other Rishonim say, there's a din in derech eretz. We've already learned that who's supposed to be the Beitzayah? The Gadol, right? The Gadol b'chachma is supposed to be the Beitzayah. So there's a halacha of kedima when it comes to B'tzias Hapas. There's a halacha that you're supposed to give preference, you're supposed to give kedima to the Gadol b'chachma, to the Baal Hasuda, in certain cases to the Kayin, but there's a din of kedima when it comes to B'tzias Hapas. So, if you're being mechabed the Gadol to go ahead and be the Beitzayah, so right away when I describe the scenario to you, imagine the family is sitting around the table, Tati goes ahead and makes a bracha on the challah, and Yankala sticks out his hand, before Tati goes ahead and takes a bite, Yankala sticks out his hand, rips off a piece of challah and eats it, before Tati went ahead and ate a piece of challah. Is that Bakovidik? That's not Bakovidik. Therefore, says the Prima Godim, he says, no, this halacha is not only when the Beitzayah is being moitzi the Mesubin. You're right that in that case, according to the Rosh, according to the Rabbeinu Yoina, there's a halacha in Hilchas Brachas. It's much more serious. It's not just derech eretz. It's a halacha. I mean, even though derech eretz kadmol l'Torah, derech eretz is very, very important. It's very critical. But it's a technicality in Hilchas Brachas, according to the Rosh and the Rabbeinu Yoina. It's a technicality in Hilchas Brachas that you can't eat before the Beitzayah, because if you eat before the Beitzayah, there's a chesaron in the bracha. Because the Beitzayah needs to eat in order to be able to be moitzi you. Says the Prima Godim, no, that's not what we're dealing with, because we don't go with the Rosh in his first teretz, and we don't go with the Rabbeinu Yoina. We go with the Rashba and others. And according to them, there's no chesaron in the bracha. So why is it that the Mesubin can't eat before the Beitzayah? Because it's not derech eretz. The Beitzayah went ahead and made the bracha. You're going to go challah before he does. Even if he's not being moitzi you in the bracha. Even if you're making your own bracha. But you don't go ahead and eat before the Beitzayah. We're going to see a halacha later that the Beitzayah, it's not only that the Beitzayah gets kedima for the B'tzias Hapas. When you bring out the serving platter of the roast of the prime rib, it's supposed to go to the Beitzayah first. Ma'anyin Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai. What does the B'tzias Hapas have to do with the rib roast? No, because why was the Beitzayah? Because he was the Gadol. So if he's the Gadol, he gets the rib roast first. He gets the potato kugel first, and he gets the chocolate cake first. And that's all dinim and derech eretz. So according to most Rishonim, the first halacha that we learned here, Ein HaMesubin Rasham Litam Achigitam HaBeitzayah, is a din in derech eretz. And that's why we have over here two scenarios over here in the Mishnah Berurah Kat Nayin Vav. First, the Chavetz Chaim said this halacha applies Kishayotzu beberachas HaBeitzayah, when the Mesubin are being yoitzu with the bracha of the Beitzayah. That would be according to the Rosh, according to the Rabbeinu Yoina, that there's a chesaron in the bracha. Then he brings down the Prima Godim that says this halacha applies even if the Mesubin are not being yoitzu with the bracha of the Beitzayah, because they're making their own brachas. But still, Ke'evan Chakulam Zekukim L'Kikara Ishala Beitzayah, that's what the Chavetz Chaim says in Ayin Vav, since all of the Mesubin need to get challah from the Beitzayah, they don't have their own challah, they're getting challah from the Beitzayah, Ein miderech hakavod litoim kaidim sheyitoim hu. It's not bakavedik, it's not derech eretz that you should eat before he eats. Okay. Now let's go to the Ramah. Says the Ramah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, last word on the line. No, I'm sorry, not right. Says the Ramah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 lines up from the bottom line, middle of the line, right by the Ois Kat Nayin Ches for the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Ramah, Aval mutter laseis l'chal echad chelkai kaidem sheyoichal hu. What the balabas can do, okay? The Mesubin are not allowed to eat before the balabas. Now, reasons the Ramah like this. If the halacha is that the Mesubin are not allowed to eat before the Beitzea, then it would seem to stand to reason that the way this should work is the Beitzea should make the Hamoitzi, he should cut himself a piece, and he should eat it, and only then should he give out to the rest of the people. Because if he's going to cut the challah up and give out challah to the rest of the people before he eats, why is he doing that? They can't eat anyway. Why are you making a hefsek between the hamoitzi and when you eat? To give challah to them, they can't eat until you eat. And since they can't eat until you eat, it's a waste of time to give challah out to them before you eat. And maybe that should be a hefsek. Says the Ramah, it's not a hefsek. Says the Ramah, you're allowed to give everybody their portion of challah, kaidem sheyoichal hu, before he himself eats, v'hem yamtinu ad sheyoichal hu, and they'll wait until he eats. And he brings this down from Taisus in the Mordechai. Says the Mishnah Berurah kanan ches avamutter vein bez hafsaka, and that does not constitute a hefsek. T'chol zet tzarich sudahu. Why is it not a hefsek? The reason it's not a hefsek, and he brings this down from the Magen Avram, he says it's not a hefsek because it's tzarchei suda. Part of the tzarchei suda is giving everybody their piece of challah. Tzarchei suda are not a hefsek. So says the Magen Avram. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and they're going to wait milechol. They're not going to eat until the Beitzea eats, because that's the halacha that we learned. Even if the Beitzea gives explicit permission to the rest of the people to eat before him, there are those that say, and he brings this down here from the Dirshu, that no, the Beitzea can't give them reshus to go eat before him. It's not bakavedik, and therefore they can't do it. Now, V'das HaTaz, the Mishnah Berurah continues and he says it's the opinion of the Taz, B'inyan zeh, de'ein kedai lahabeitzea sheyichalek l'chalechad chelkai. The Taz says, I don't like the Ramah. The Taz says, in a chinami, the Beitzea should not give out challah to the Mesubin around the table before he himself eats, because it is a hefsek. Since they can't eat from what you're giving them, until he himself eats, Daz disagrees with the Ramah. He says, no, it is a hefsek. Why shouldn't it be hefsek? Rather, he should make sure to eat first, and only then should he give out portions to everybody else. He says the other Achronim agreed to this, the Graz and the Magin Gibarim agreed to this. It looks to me like the Mishnah Berurah is trying to be machriya that way, that better you should eat yourself first if you're the Beitzea, and only then give out the challah to the rest of the people. Continues the Mechaber. 3 lines from the bottom, last word on the line. Another scenario. Let's say everybody has their own challah. Everybody has their own bilkala. So let's step away from Shabbos for a minute, and let's imagine a Sheva Brachas. You have a Sheva Brachas, and you have 10 men sitting around a table. And there's a gadol. There's maybe the Baal Simcha, or maybe a Rosh Hashiva, or maybe a Rav is there. And they want to be mechabed the gadol to be the Beitzea. So he's going to make a moitzi, and he's going to be moitzi everybody. But everybody has their own challah. Everybody has a bilkala by their plate. So in this scenario, we don't need challah from the Beitzea. We all have our own challah. Says the Mechaber, V'im kol echad oichel mikikaroi. If everybody has their own challah, ve'ein kulam zekukim lakikar shebiyad Beitzea, and therefore they don't have to come on to the loaf that the Beitzea has. They're not going to get challah from the Beitzea. They don't need it. Rasham litom koidim, then they are allowed to eat before the Beitzea eats. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ice cut and pay. If everybody has their own loaf, oichel mikikaroi, v'yesh lechalechad mihem kikar shalem b'fnei atzmai. It's very important. Everybody has a shalem. Everybody has a bilkala in front of them. So then ice cut and pay aleph, rasham litom koidim. Then the mesubin can eat before the Beitzea. Even though they're all being yoitze with the bracha of the mevarich. See, this is where you see that there's no question we don't go like the Rosh in his first teretz to the Rabbeinu Yaina. Because over here we're saying very clear, if everybody has their own challah, then even if they're being yoitze with the bracha of the Beitzea, but since they all have their own challah, and they don't need to get challah from the Beitzea, it's not a pigima in the kavod of the Beitzea if they eat first from their own bilkala. But note that the Mishnah Berurah said everybody has to have a shalem. Why does everybody have to have a shalem? Very simple. Let's imagine the Sheva brachas where the Beitzea has a suda challah, that's a shalem, and everybody else has a slice of rye bread. Well, in that case, if the Beitzea makes the bracha on the suda challah, he's making a bracha on a shalem. Now, if you take a piece from your slice of rye bread, you're taking from something that's not a shalem. A shalem is a bigger chashivus over a non-shalem. So if the bracha was made on a shalem, and you are yoitze with a bracha on a shalem, you should eat a piece from the shalem. Don't eat a slice of rye bread. So now you have to wait to get challah from him. If you don't have a shalem, you have to wait to get challah from him. And you can see this in Shar Tzion Kat Nayin Aleph, where the Chavetz Chaim says, Dim ein l'chol echad rak prusas lechem. If everybody only has a piece of bread, they have a slice of rye bread, hareihem zekukim likikaroi. Then they have to wait for the loaf of the Beitzea. Because there's a bigger Indian to make a bracha on a shalem, and he made the bracha on the shalem, you should get from the shalem. In the same vein as this halacha, continues the Mechaber, and the Chaber says, second line from the bottom, so two words off the end of the line, Ve'emu Shabbos, let's say it's not a Sheva brachas, let's say it's a Friday night Suda or a Shabbos day Suda, then Sarek sheyehei lifnei ha-mesubin lechem Mishnah chutz mima shelifnei ha-Beitzea. If you want that the mesubin should be able to eat before the Beitzea, then each one of the mesubin is going to have lechem Mishnah, because otherwise you run into the same problem, even a bigger problem. On Shabbos you need lechem Mishnah. So if you're yoitze with the bracha of the Beitzea on lechem Mishnah, but then you want to eat from your bilkala, no, you need to get from the lechem Mishnah. So you have to wait for the Beitzea. Once you have to wait for the Beitzea's challah, you have to wait for the Beitzea to eat. So again, says the Mechaber, V'emu Shabbos, tzarich sheyehei lifnei ha-mesubin lechem Mishnah. Each one of the mesubin would have to have lechem Mishnah in front of him, chutz mima shelifnei ha-Beitzea, besides the lechem Mishnah that's in front of the Beitzea, va'oz yiu rasham litoim kodim ha-Beitzea. And only then will the mesubin be allowed to eat before the Beitzea. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut pebeis v'mu Shabbos v'uhadin yomtiv or yomtiv is cut pegimel tzarich sheyehei. Then each one of the mesubin would have to have lechem Mishnah in order for them to be allowed to eat before the Beitzea. Tzarich sheyehei tim ein liftei kol echad me'asubin lechem Mishnah, because if they don't each individually have lechem Mishnah, hareim tzrichem lismach ala Beitzea. Then they have to rely on the Beitzea, sheyesh lefanav lechem Mishnah, who has lechem Mishnah in front of him, v'litaim me'oisa lechem. Now they need to get lechem from the beitzah, because they need to get lechem Mishnah. Ve'enam rasham litaim kaidem loy. And now, once again, they won't be allowed to eat before the beitzah, because they're getting lechem from the beitzah. And since they're getting lechem from the beitzah, it would be a pegima in the kavod of the beitzah if they would go ahead and eat first. So again, we have a very interesting halacha over here. We have a halacha that eina mesubin rasham litaim ad sheyitam ha'beitzah. You're not allowed to eat before the beitzah eats. We've seen that this halacha is negeya if you're being yoitze with the bracha of the beitzah and you're going to be getting challah from the beitzah, then you're not allowed to eat before the beitzah eats. Now this is most often negeya by a Shabbos Suda. That's where it's most often negeya. By a traditional Shabbos Suda, it's only the beitzah, it's only the balabayis, the tati, who has lechem Mishnah. He's being moitzi everybody in the bracha of hamoitzi, and he's giving out the challah. No one is allowed to eat before he eats. We have to wait for him to eat, and then we could eat. Where this becomes the gay a lot also, and this is perhaps, I've seen this happen, you should know, by Shabbos Sheva Brachas. Let's say, you have a Shabbos Sheva Brachas, and the Baal Simcha or the Gadol is the Beitzah, and he has Lechem Mishnah. He has a big, beautiful Shabbos Suda, and then he has a Bilkala to make Lechem Mishnah. Everybody has Bilkala in front of them. Very often what you see happen is that the Beitzah picks up the Lechem Mishnah, berachah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, hamoitzi lechem in the Aretz, and everybody who's sitting there that has a Bilkala by their plate, they don't want to wait for him. So they take their Bilkala right away and they start eating. You're not allowed to do that. That's the perfect example of Ein HaMesubin Rasham Litaim Ad Sheyitam HaBeitzah. Now, I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. I take that back. It's not true that that's the perfect example. The reason it's not the perfect example is because in that case, the reason you're not allowed to do it is because of Lechem Mishnah. It's not because of Ein HaMesubin Rasham Litaim Ad Sheyitam HaBeitzah, because the Mechaber Doch said that if everybody has their own challah, and that's the scenario I just gave you, each person has his own bilkala. Since you don't have to wait for challah from him, you would think that you would be allowed to eat. But you can't, because you do have to wait for challah from him. Why? Because you need lechem Mishnah. So again, because it's a Shabbos Sheva Brachas, and because you need lechem Mishnah, and you only have one bilkala in front of you, memela you need to wait to get from him. Once you have to wait to get from him, you're not allowed to eat before he does, because to do so would be a pagam in his kavod. Okay. Hope this was clear. Let's go weiter at Samachei of Beis Sif Tes Zayin. Ein ha-beitzah rashoy l'vtzaya. The beitzah is not allowed to finish cutting. He's not allowed to cut the piece off of the loaf ad sheyichla amein mipi roiv ha'onim, until most of the assembled finish saying amein. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ein ha-beitzah hainu imu moitziam yedei chayvasam bebracha. If the beitzah is being moitzi the people around the table with his berachas hamoitzi, then he's not allowed to cut the challah until they finish saying amein. Why is that? Says the Mishnah Berurah's cut pehei amein mipi roiv shegam anias amein michlal brachahi. Because remember what we learned earlier in Sif Aleph. In Sif Aleph, in this Siman, we learned that you don't cut the challah until you finish making the bracha. Let's say you're all alone. Forget mesubin. You have a challah, and you're making a bracha on a shalem. So you take the whole challah, berachah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hamoitzi lechem in Aretz. You don't cut it until you finish the bracha. Why? Because you want the bracha in its entirety to go on the shalem. Well, now let's transfer that to our case with his beitzah and his mesubin. If the beitzah is being moitzi the mesubin in the bracha, so until the point at which the mesubin say amen, they're being yoitze with the bracha and they need to say amen. We don't want the bracha to be finished We want Adarab. We want the bracha to be finished while the challah is still a shalom. If you're going to go cut the challah before they say amen, then the bracha didn't really end until the challah was already cut. We don't want that. Then it means that the bracha went on a broken piece of challah. We want the bracha to go on a shalom. So you need to wait until Rov of the people say amen. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Pei, Shegam Anias amen michal brachi. Aval hamiyot ha'ma'arichin yoser midai. But we only have to wait for Rov HaMesubin. We don't have to wait for the one guy at the end of the table going, amen. He's being ma'arich yoser midai. He's doing something wrong. We don't have to be concerned with it. Ain't tzarich lahamten aleim. Shekol ha'marich ba'amen yoser midai. Anybody who stretches out the amen more than is appropriate, einei ela toya, is making a mistake in halacha, and therefore we do not have to wait for him. Okay, second line down in the Shulchan Aruch Sif Yud Zayin. Ha boitzeya, the boitzeya, poshit yadoi tchila la ka'ara lechol. This is the halacha I mentioned earlier. Not only does he get the kibbut of being the boitzeya, but he gets the potato kugel first, and he gets the rib roast first, and he gets the chocolate cake first. He gets everything first. Ha boitzeya poshit yadoi tchila la ka'ara. The boitzeya stretches his hand first to the ka'ara, to the serving platter, lechol, to take a portion. But if he wants to give honor to somebody who's bigger than him, Rashay is allowed to. So let's say a scenario where the balabayis is the boitzeya, but there's a Rosh Yeshiva sitting at the table. We said earlier that sometimes we want the Baal Simcha or the balabayis to be the boitzeya even over somebody who's bigger than him, because we want the balabayis to be boitzeya ba'ayin yafeh. We want him to give out a nice big portion to everybody. So it could be that the balabayis was the boitzeya, but there's a Rosh Yeshiva sitting next to him. So if the balabayis wants to be mechabed the Rosh Yeshiva and give him the rib roast first, to give him the potato kugel first, harishus biyadai, he's allowed to do that. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut pevev abitzeya shu balabayis. Or whoever you gave the permission to be the boitzeya. He stretches out his hand first to the serving platter. Since you were mechabed him already with the biggest kibbut vasishayich, you gave him the kibbut of making the bracha, you gave him the kibbut of being the boitzeya. If now you don't give him the kavod of the potato kugel, Adarabi, it looks like you're being mezalzel in the bracha. Somehow you're saying that, yeah, we will mechabed him to be the boitzeya. We will mechabed him to be the one to make the hamaitzi, but that don't mean that he gets the prime rib first. I want to get the prime rib first. No, if you gave him the biggest kibbut vasishayich, if you were mechabed him to make the bracha, then certainly you got to be mechabed him with the lesser things. Okay, I think we're going to stop over here. B'yas Hashem, next time we will continue with Sif Yud Ches. Okay, I was getting worried that it might be even worse than that. Baruch Hashem, at least we covered that much. Okay, the schos of limud HaTorah should be made in Agans Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shem should send Yeshuas, Refuas, Parnasa, Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be Zoicha finally to see the B'yas Kol Tzedek, the Gula Shlema, B'meherev Yomeinu, Amen. Be well.